Aston Martin started 2023 with something to prove, and for a while they delivered. Podiums, headlines, and Fernando Alonso turning back the clock. It looked like the Silverstone-based team was finally getting things right. But fast forward to 2025, and it feels like that is now a distant memory. A fever dream, if you will. What happened? How did Aston Martin fall off so fast? 2023, so that was the year that it all clicked. Alonso signs on, the Aston Martin comes out swinging, and pretty much podiums right out of the gate. The car looked very quick, especially in the early runs of the season. They were right in the mix, and credit where credit's due. They made many of the big teams look silly, apart from Red Bull of course, who were just doing their own thing, miles and miles ahead. However, 6 podiums in the first 8 races is pretty impressive, and it's not bad for a team that was stuck in 7th the year before. They made a big leap. People were even calling them the Green Red Bull, and honestly, the side pod design made that nickname kind of fair. But that's F1, you see what works, and if you can't beat it, copy it really well. We have seen this many a times, like the pink Mercedes, we all remember that. They had momentum and hype, and Fernando Alonso was clearly loving life again. For a while, Aston Martin looked like the next big thing, and were delivering on their plan to fight at the top. But I think here's where things started to go sideways. Around mid-season, other teams decided to finally join the party and begin bringing major upgrades. McLaren stepped up, Mercedes found some pace, even Ferrari got their act together. Imagine that. And Aston Martin, not so much. Their early advantage started slipping, and it became clear that AMR23 didn't have much headroom for development. It was fast out of the box, but that was kind of it. And in F1, if you're not improving, you're going backwards fast. So by the second half of the season, the podiums were becoming a distant memory. Alonso was still wringing the neck out of that car, but the pace just wasn't there anymore. He achieved still some decent results. He got a couple podiums here and there, but the pace was harder to find. And don't even get me started on Lance Stroll, because honestly, clap if you care about Lance Stroll. Anyways, it wasn't a disaster yet, but it wasn't looking like a title challenge either. It was fixable. So after a solid 2023, finishing 5th in the Constructors and Alonso finishing 4th in the driver's standings, that's pretty decent. You'd expect Aston Martin to come into 2024 swinging. New car, lessons learned, real contender status. That didn't happen. A revised front wing and nose design, side pods and cooling adjustments. They changed to the push rod configuration. Some significant changes. However, the AMR24 was basically a flatline. It didn't solve any of their problems from the previous year, and it didn't really bring anything new to the table either. They were still hanging around like the top of the midfield, but the front running pace that they had completely gone out of the window. Alonso kept dragging it into decent results as he does, but only he can do so much. Then there's Lance Stroll. Look, I'm not the biggest Stroll fan, but when your teammate's squeezing everything out of the car and you're still getting knocked out of Q2 like it's your job, you gotta ask, why is this man still in a seat? Well, we all know the answer to that. Not good enough. The team clearly started to feel stuck. All that money, all that talk, all that investment, and still no consistent results. It's kind of embarrassing. Now, here we are in 2025, and things have really just fallen off. The AMR25, it's not good, not terrible, just painfully average. And in F1, average equals invisible. And at this point, the rest of the field is just moved past them. McLaren's flying, Ferrari's competitive again, even RB is starting to look more dangerous on some weekends. Haas, actual points, Mercedes seem to finally understand the regulations, Williams are climbing, and even Alpine, yes Alpine, have dragged their tractor forward. Meanwhile, Aston Martin's kind of just there. Not in crisis, but definitely not living up to expectations either. Now there's even talk about Alonso finally hanging it up, or maybe jumping ship one last time if something comes up. I swear, that man is cursed. And honestly, who could blame him? I think what bothers me so much was, from the promise that they had to where they are now, like McLaren's resurgence from the back to the very top, it wasn't impossible for Aston Martin to turn their fortunes around. And actually, when you compare McLaren to Aston Martin and the difference in development, how far McLaren have risen and how far Aston Martin have fallen, it's kind of unforgivable how bad Aston Martin have become. Just really bad. So what actually went wrong? Because on paper, Aston Martin has everything: money, facilities, experienced leadership, a top tier driver. That's the thing, F1's not about having the most resources, it's about using them right, and they failed to do that. I think Aston Martin's biggest issue, they seemed to peak far too early. The 2023 car was good, but they didn't build on it. China just froze. Maybe they look so good because other teams were just so bad. However, other teams made smarter upgrades. They were more aggressive in development. Aston stays safe, and that doesn't work when everyone else is playing catch up. Add in the lack of a second driver who can consistently bring points, and you've got a recipe for disaster. They had the moment, they just didn't know how to turn it into something more, which is a huge wasted opportunity from them. I think Aston Martin have turned the lights off this year for this car's development and are now focusing on 2026 regulations with the help of their new man Adrian Newey, which I think makes sense because they totally screwed themselves in these regulations, and to focus on 2026 is probably their only hope. They'll be hoping that Honda get the engine right and not a 2015 level disaster GP2 engine, and hoping Adrian Newey can sprinkle some magic onto one of his chassis that he usually does. If they get this wrong, then I really don't know what the future looks like for them, because it's a lot of talk and not a lot of doing. Anyway, what do you think? Do you think they can bounce back in 2026, or was 2023 just a one season wonder? Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. If you liked the video, make sure to give it a like, it really helps. And subscribe, I would love to have you here. The majority of you are not subscribed, and I find it quite offensive. Come join the F1ologist family. You yourself are probably an F1ologist, so make sure to join. And I hope you like this video again, and I'll see you in the next one.